What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Kurt Luidhardt, and Kurt, you can check people out. Check Kurt out at libertyspenders.com, also the prospergroupcorp.com. And Kurt, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. We were introduced by Dan Cashel. Dan's awesome. He has Breakthrough 3X. We did an episode, How to Triple Your Profits and Impact, with Dan Cashel. So check that episode out. Paul Bigham, when I was researching you, Kurt, and Kurt has a great book called Liberty Spenders. I did listen to it on Audible. It reminds me of Paul Bigham, and he does more kind of direct mail for nonprofits, right? So you guys would hit it off. We talked about crafting compelling sales copy, but I think he's raised $2 billion for the state of Israel from from Christian organizations. So it's like some amazing gold about copywriting sales in that interview. Richard Viguerie, I don't know if you know Richard Viguerie, talked about building political movements. I think he started with Reagan.
He did.
And he was at the time in his 80s and still working like 12 hours a day. So that's a fascinating one. And on the other side of the aisle, we had Mike Nellis, who had the magic of direct response and AIs for not conservative, for more democratic stuff. So on the other side of the aisle. But
wow.
Anyways, check those out and more. You know Richard? Or
anytime anybody can listen to Richard Viguerie, they should do it. He is the father of direct mail fundraising, at least on the conservative side of the aisle. And I am coming in as probably a sort of third generation after, or second generation after him. The people who came into politics are sort of his grandchildren, if you will. And of course, we do direct response email and that sort of thing, and got a chance to work with Viguerie and his company through the years. He's a great person to listen to about this kind of thing. And you're absolutely right. And got it all going under Ronald Reagan.
Amazing. And he was on The Daily Show at one point. I watched a clip of him featured on The Daily Show. I don't know how long ago it was, but it's pretty interesting. And by the way, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. We do that in a few ways. One, we're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, accountability, and the full execution and production. Number two, we're an easy button for a company's gifting. So we make gifting and staying top of mind for clients, partners, prospects, even people send it to their staff from a culture perspective. You just give us the list, we'll do everything else. And for us, Kurt, it's not like one gift. We send a campaign of gifts. So it's maybe 3 to 4 gifts a year for 4 or 5 years. So we kind of call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background to make it stress-free for that company to build amazing relationships. And, over the past 15 years, I found no better way than to, one, profile the people and companies I admire in my podcast and send them sweet treats in the mail. So if you have questions, go to rise25.com or email support@rise25.com.
Yes.
So finally, I get to Kurt Luidhardt. He's CEO and co-founder of the Prosper Group with his wife, Kristen. And the Prosper Group is a leading digital agency. Obviously, they serve Republican politics, but they serve other companies as well. And he started it with his wife in 2006. And through the Prosper Group, their team has helped raise over $500 million. They've helped elect more than 100 members of Congress, 15 U.S. senators, 15 governors, and a president. And the same precision when I research this stuff, Kurt, the same marketing data storytelling can be used for anything, right? It doesn't have to be
Absolutely.
For this. Obviously, you've used it to shape national campaigns. And now it actually helps power Liberty Business Alliance. And so people can check out libertyspenders.com. But Liberty Business Alliance connects founders to the $5 trillion of Liberty spender market. That means millions of Christian and conservative consumers ready to support companies that share their values, right? I know they founded a dozen companies, profitably exited 3 of them. And I do want to mention the book, Liberty Spenders, which is how to reach the $5 trillion market of high value conservative faith-based clients to grow your business. Kurt, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Let's start off with Prosper Group and what you do. And I'm going to pull up the site.
Yeah. Well, Prosper Group was started in 2006. My wife and I met in college in the College Republicans, no more nerdy meet cute that meet in a College Republican club, and decided we really wanted to get both passionate about being involved in Republican politics. And we thought, man, we're just going to go out and change the world. And so started working for political candidates, focusing on digital. And the reason we were focused on digital in 2006 was because we thought this is sort of emerging, digital marketing for political candidates. And so we got involved in that. Now, almost 20 years later, we've helped elect over 100 members of Congress, 15 governors, 15 U.S. senators, and we were on the ground managing digital fundraising activities for Donald Trump even in 2016, which was a unique experience.
We'll get into Liberty Spenders. And if anyone's watching, listening to the audio, there is a video here, and we have Liberty Spenders here, and we have, Prosper Group Corp. But I do want to dig into the Prosper Group Corp for a second. And because in your book, you talk about this. It doesn't go into all the detail that I wanted to know, but there was a very successful email campaign with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And regardless of what you think of Donald Trump or politics, put that aside, or just listen to the actual message, because people, this is it's a fiery topic for people depending on either side. So I always tell people, just listen to the content. Don't worry about the politics for a second here. So what'd you do with Donald Trump and the email?
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. It feels like a million years ago, but in the summer of 2016, in May, Donald Trump finally vanquished his final opponent in the Republican primary, Ted Cruz, in Indiana, my home state. And we then reached out to Donald Trump after and said, well, do you need any help on digital? And Trump was such a surprise candidate, whereas Hillary had 250 people in her digital marketing department alone. Trump was operating with just Brad Parscale at the time, who eventually became his campaign manager in 2020, and a couple of his staff. And so they needed to really grow super fast. And I just happened to get Brad Parscale on the phone. I mean, nobody in the business knew who he was at the time because he had not really worked in politics previously. He had a pre-existing relationship with Trump. And so we ended up meeting with him, and by June, we were hired to help spool up a digital fundraising operation, which didn't exist previously because Trump had self-funded his entire primary to the tune of about $38 million of his own money, and he had not really formally ever asked anyone for money at that time. He had built an email list, but he hadn't sent an email to them because he's not asking for anything. And so we were to help him with a standing start, build out a fundraising campaign on email, which I could go on because there's probably 45 minutes on just what all happened in the first 2 weeks alone.
You mean to get the email warmed up, or what do you mean by that?
Oh yeah, I mean he's got hundreds of thousands of emails who've never been emailed, and they hadn't cleaned up the list or anything. And you've got a lot of pranksters. There was some prankster who got on his website and loaded up every member of the Swedish parliament or something. And all the emails got validated because they were real emails, but they weren't real people who signed up on their own. So we sent out our first email blast, every member of the Swedish parliament got a solicitation from Donald Trump asking for money, which became a bit of a story. And, because technically
Someone
he
opted
was,
them in.
yeah, someone opted him in, but you can't solicit a foreign person for money for your campaign. And so we had sent an email to these people, not knowing who they were, asking them for money. They can't give, we can't receive money. So it's just kind of those kinds of things that normally, if you had a year or so to build everything out, you'd have all nailed down. Didn't happen. But we were also trying to convince the president to do email fundraising, and what to do and what to ask for. Of course, it wasn't the president at the time, but he was trying to find out what he wanted to say in his first email was even a thing. We wanted to offer signed copies of his book or some other things as a way to kind of, and he thought, well, I don't want to personally, he says, I can't, if we sell 10,000 of these, I can't personally sign all of these. And he felt like, well, I can't use an auto pen. That's not really, my signature. I was just all of this going on. Finally, what we settled on and he and his team liked was an email that offered a matching contribution from Trump. So if we raised $1 million, Trump would put in another $1 million, which is always nice, when your donor feels like, well, hey, I'm doubling. If I give $1, I'm really getting $2, and Trump could do that legally. And so we got all spooled up, and that same email I was referencing with the Swedish parliament or whatever, we sent out, and that was his first email solicitation. It was in the summer, so I think June, might have been late May. But at the time, the record for the most money raised out of a single email blast was for former President Barack Obama. And I can't remember what the number was, 1.5 million or something that he raised in his reelect or something from a single email. And we hit 2.6, and it was on just that email. And there was all this pent up demand, right? He's never asked these small dollar donor types to give, which was surreal to watch, because $2.6 million in 24 hours from thousands and thousands and thousands of donors, you're just refreshing the donation platform, and you're seeing these numbers go up, and you're thinking, this is crazy. Not to mention we also launched some prospecting campaigns that day via email that raised another 1.4 to get to 4 million on that first day. And the whole campaign continued that way. The most interesting thing about that 2016 race is the Trumps had never run a big campaign before, so there were no rules. There was no standard operating procedures that would exist if it was Mitt Romney or Jeb Bush or something. And so they just did what worked. And he was attracting a number of crossover Democrats for that first campaign, and we were just consistently shocked to see donations and money coming in from people we knew weren't Republicans. So it was just a really interesting campaign to be involved with. We ended up doing much, but not all, of his copywriting for his email campaigns. We ran all of his text message fundraising, his app. He had the America First app on that campaign, and worked on that. My wife worked on it 4.5 months full time. She moved to San Antonio, Texas, where they headquartered all of this, and worked in their offices.
I'm interested when you first, and again, this is applicable to any business, really. I was talking to another business owner last week, and they're like, we were just talking, I don't know why we were talking about email lists, and they're like, I have 9,000 people on my email list. I'm like, when's the last time you emailed them? And they're like, 5 years ago. I'm like, that's terrible. Yeah. But what do you do? What do you send for the first few emails to warm those people up? I mean, I'm not sure if you just straight out, flat out ask them for money at that time, or you have a couple warm up. Well, what do those look like?
I would never do that. What I did.
You did. Okay.
What we did for Trump was just load him up and say, give us money, right? What I would normally encourage is to send an email that demands a response or asks for a response or gives them a reason to click. So maybe you're asking an opinion. Please reply back, or give them something really interesting that encourages clicks, because your email service providers are judging the merits of your email campaigns by the kinds of engagements and responses they're seeing. So the more you can get that, the better. And then I would be very aggressive in your hygiene. So if you have 9,000, if your friend has 9,000 emails and sends out a couple of emails and half of them don't respond, I wouldn't cry about it. I'd just get rid of them. Because your percentage, your engagement's going to be represented in a percentage. So having a bunch of dead emails on your list is really hurting your deliverability for your emails. If you want to know, well, why are all my emails going to junk? Well, it's because half of your list doesn't engage, or 80% of your list doesn't engage, and you just need them off your list, and it makes your percentage much more appealing.
I've gotten those emails too, Kurt, where, hey, I'm taking you off. Like it's actually, I'm taking you off unless you click this or whatever. And it was probably just them doing hygiene. I probably hadn't responded in a while, and I was thinking, oh, should I stay on or not? So I like that email or approach too.
Yeah, I'll tell you, one of the craziest things I learned once, I learned by accident. So as a marketer, one good rule, by the way, is you never use lorem ipsum text when you're writing something, because inevitably you forget that you have fake stuff there and you don't replace it. And we had written an email for a candidate who's running in Michigan, and the email was targeted towards people who had not donated before, and we couldn't think of a good subject line, so we just put the subject line was just email to non-donors. That was the subject line, but we didn't have.
I thought you were going to say email to Lauren Iso, and they thought it was someone's name.
Yeah. So we had
that probably would have been a better headline.
Yeah, it would. Well, but here's the interesting thing.
Yeah,
we sent it out, not changing the subject line. Our client was very upset about it because they hadn't approved, email to non-donors, and that's pretty aggressive, right? To get an email, it was the best fundraising email they had. And the lesson there was sometimes to get movement, you've got to you really have to call people out, and so we'll often do that. And when we're seeing email people fall off or die off, like that sort of aggressive thing, like click or you're gone, you'd be surprised how many people click on those and re-engage.
It's all a test, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious. So the offer was, so for Trump, just because he's so recognizable, you could ask for money off the bat. Well, what you typically wouldn't. Is there any other reasons why in this case you did that?
I would, well, for him, I would, we had two issues, which was we hadn't ever really, done anything with the email list. And normally I would have sent, 5,000 at a time and try to kind of, to your point, kind of warm it up. But it would have taken 4 or 6 weeks, and we're in the middle of a hotly contested presidential campaign. Nothing is allowed to take 4 to 6 weeks. So we just went up and we just went and gone. And that works for Trump because, by June of 2016, Trump versus Hillary was the top story internationally, let alone the U.S. So no one got an email from Donald Trump and said, what's this about, right?
Right.
And that's often the same for my other political clients, but which creates a disadvantage. There's a reason why we get a lot of the same faces in politics, is because it's really difficult to build that kind of awareness. And Trump built it outside of politics, being on TV and the whole deal. And so for these first time candidates, they're thinking, well, if Donald Trump can raise $4 million in a day, then certainly I ought to be able to raise $40,000. But it's not that simple. Kurt Luidhardt for Congress, nobody knows who Kurt Luidhardt is. And none of those emails get opened. And so to your point, for most of my people, you've got to have a long introductory process, and you got to provide some value. Where most political candidates screw up because they're so all addicted to these small dollar donors is all they do is ask these people for money, and their lists fall off pretty quick because there's no value in between. There's no, there's no rest. You don't get 2 emails with really cool political news and then one asks for money. It's And every day it's another one. And after a while, the hyperbole and the urgency just doesn't resonate anymore. It's the boy who cried wolf thing. If today is we always joke in politics, this election is the most important election ever. And so was last election. And so will the next election be. And after a while, people just roll their eyes when you say it's the most important election. So you've got to find a way to provide some value and not just be asking all the time.
In that email, it seems like you spent a lot of time on the offer, right? So
Yeah.
talk about what the offer was, and then you mentioned a couple other, what was in the running that just didn't make it because you went with what you thought was the strongest offer.
Yeah, I mean, Trump's offer that we did the very first email was what we would call a matching donor offer in politics. So it's for every dollar you give, it's going to be matched. Now, what's interesting about that, it's become a more controversial method. It's perfectly legal for Donald Trump to match any donation to his campaign because any candidate running can write an unlimited amount of money to their own campaign. But then it became common for other campaigns to make these similar matching offers. So Kurt Luidhardt for Congress would say, I have a, quote, group of donors who are matching every dollar to your campaign. Well, donors can't give a federal campaign more than $3,700. So some of these folks who were making these matching donor offers weren't telling the truth, right? That it was actually happening. It's not even legal because you can't, you'd have to have a group of 1,000 donors to match that because they are maxed out at $3,700. But so that was our offer. It worked really well, very credible. Trump had already given $38 million, and it was super exciting. But we were also looking, and eventually did for the campaign, things where people could get a copy of his book, The Art of the Deal, right? And you could get autographed copies, and eventually you could get MAGA hats and autographed.
If you
MAGA
donate
hats.
enough, type of thing.
Yeah, you donate $25 and we'll send you this, or $50. I think eventually they were testing on Facebook a $280 offer for a copy of The Art of the Deal, right? Which you could buy used for $5, right?
With him signing it or not signing it?
They did both.
Oh, both. Okay.
And eventually, eventually it was clear, we were selling tens of thousands of these signed merchandise, and he was okay with an auto pen, right? So we could auto pen some of the merchandise, right? So those did really well. Things like, and we didn't run the Facebook campaigns ourselves, but on Facebook, those Art of the Deal things, the books were good offers. Even in his reelection campaign, which we didn't do this part, but Ted Cruz, who's one of our clients, the Trump campaign offered a Ted Cruz book to people who gave to his campaign, and that did really well.
You're like, I'm not going to sign it, but Ted Cruz will sign his 10,000.
Well, yeah.
We'll get him carpal tunnel. That's fine.
But really what works in politics is urgency. That's really good. For a lot of businesses.
By the way, it's not just politics, right? I mean, this applies to everything.
Yeah, this absolutely applies. It's just harder to do.
Yeah.
If you're a business, sometimes it's hard. People might
you have to
be interested
have some
in your
kind
product.
of manufacturer urgency somehow.
How do you get them to pull the trigger today? Well, in politics, the election is in November. So I can't procrastinate and then decide to give him money in December. I got to do it now. And there's a number of milestones. Oh, let's give around the debate. We need to raise money for this, or we need to launch this television advertisement. So you can create urgency. That's always really effective, but it's got to be credible. And again, I think that's where people struggle in politics is everything's always urgent all the time. If everything is urgent, then nothing is, right? And then you've got to create emotion, right? So people in all things, business or politics, decisions are made emotionally, justified intellectually. So a political donation, particularly a $25 one, tends to be an impulse buy. Like people don't sit down at the kitchen table and say and discuss with their spouse and kids, should we donate money to this campaign? You do that when you buy a car. You don't do that when you donate. You get an email, you get a solicitation, you hear something on TV, you get upset, You get emotional, you get excited, and you give money. So it's creating that emotion, which is also why so much of our political communication is negative, because the easiest way to create that emotion is to get people worked up. You know, if Donald Trump is elected, this bad thing will happen. If Kamala Harris is elected, this bad thing will happen. It'll probably happen to you, and so you need to. So that emotion combined with urgency is what's powerful for contributions. And that's why you're seeing politicians got really good at it, which is why you're seeing so much money coming in now from these small dollar contributions. I think Trump raised well over $100 million from small dollar contributors. And that was when he started in June. And I think Obama's numbers were bigger. And that's really driving a lot of our politics these days as well.
There's a lot of lessons there, Kurt, and from the urgency to the offer to the matching. I mean, even businesses, when you talk about matching or buy one get, give one.
Yep.
You have companies like, I don't know if they're still doing it or not, but like Warby Parker provides a pair of glasses to someone in need, or Tom's shoes, or Bombas socks. All of those are doing the same type of matching, so to speak, right?
Absolutely. And getting creative and trying. What we did a lot in political also is you try a lot of stuff. They were constantly testing, trying things. That's how we found out we could raise money from Democrats, is one day somebody said, okay, let's open up the targeting. In fact, it was so surprising that during the Trump 2016 campaign, I remember an article coming out written by a political consultant talking about how ridiculous it was that he was seeing ads from Trump, that he was a known Democrat, super hardcore Democrat. And what they didn't realize, he was getting so many crossover votes. He was profiting off of asking Democrats for money in 2016, particularly from, the decisive, group for Trump in 2016 was rural white Democrats or independents who voted for him. And those people were given to him and turning out in the end in these giant margins. So being willing to try stuff. And I think it's interesting. I don't think anyone but Trump would have tried that. And Brad Parscale, by the way, who ran that operation. So Brad wasn't from politics. So he didn't come. My preconceived notion, I would have said, we're not even going to try to target Democrats, because I would have said that's totally unprofessional. It's not a best practice. Why would we waste our money? Brad's like, let's turn it on, try it, see what happens. And I think as businesses too, be okay to just try stuff. Don't feel bad when it doesn't work, and move on to the next thing. And you might be shocked what works and what really connects.
Yeah, it's really quite interesting. So, I mean, that goes into targeting. Did you have a different messaging to the people, the Democrats, than the Republicans? No, same messaging.
No, it worked. I mean, for fundraising, right? So there's a whole separate side of the campaign, which was persuasion. How do we target people and convince them to vote for us or not vote for us? And that's a whole different equation. We're creating advertisements specifically targeted. So you're saying, well, Trump is pro-Israel, so how am I going to win over some voters? Well, there's a certain segment of voters, maybe they're Jewish voters, who are pro-Israel too, and I'm going to target them with that. But these rural Wisconsin Republicans we need to talk about jobs moving to Mexico. So you're sort of you're figuring out what people care about. That, and so on from a persuasion standpoint, you see a lot more diversity into these small groups. From a fundraising standpoint, it's a little less personalized, but a lot more frequent. Like we're gonna send an email out every day, and we're gonna see what's working, what's not. In fact, that they had multiple companies like ours writing copy, and so we were always even competing against other copywriters. During the campaign, and of course during that campaign, I mean, it was like it was a major death-defying news story every day, which helps,
I want to get into the book a little bit, Kurt.
Yeah.
And you can see here we're at libertyspenders.com. And if you go to book-free, you can actually download the copy. I bought it on Audible. So you're welcome for the $3 or whatever commission
I
you get
got
from Amazon.
I
But
got a little check the other
yeah,
day, so thank
exactly.
you.
That was for me. But one thing in the book, which your wife was reading this part at the time, and she didn't go into the full story, but there was something I'm my memory's hazy. Something about George Bush in your underwear. I don't remember what the story. She doesn't
Yes,
tell the
yes.
story, but I'm like, I'm definitely going to ask him about it.
Yes, yes.
And then we'll talk about there's a 5 Ps in the book, which we'll get into.
So
But I have
yes,
to have heard this story.
this is, if there was a P for being embarrassed, this is it. But it's a really funny story I can laugh about now. But not too long after this, working on the Trump campaign, it might have even been before. I try to remember the date. But George W. Bush's nephew, George P. Bush, he's Jeb's son. He was the commissioner, the railroad commissioner in Texas, which I want to say railroad commissioner. No, land commissioner. Sorry, land commissioner, which is a really important role in Texas. They've got oil issues, various things, and also just a really dynamic guy. And he's no longer an elected official there, but we were helping him in his campaign, and he was having an event for some of his campaign staff and donors, and it was going to be in Kennebunkport at the Bush family compound.
Oh, I've been there. I've been not to the compound, but like, you walk along this path and you can see the compound, and I've definitely seen it's remarkable looking.
It's remarkable. So they brought us.
You
on
got
over
up
there.
close. You got inside the compound. All right,
So
that looks cool.
we're in there, and every member of the family has what they call a cabin.
I've seen it. It's definitely not a cabin. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really a cabin probably what you and I are picturing. But so Jeb has a place there. George has a place there. I think there's another brother, and so the event for George P was at Jeb's cabin because he's Jeb's son, and we were told if George H.W. Bush and Barbara are feeling up to it because they were still alive but older at this time, they're going to come and you'll get a chance to shake their hands and meet him, which I was particularly excited about because my first interest in politics when I was a kid was when Bush was running against Dukakis. I was too young to vote, but they had an election at school, and my parents liked H.W., so I was sort of excited about H.W. winning. So super excited about meeting him. So I never met him before. And as advertised, we're there for a little bit talking, and now you see them. They were both in scooters at that time, in their scooters, making their way up the paved path to come. And so there was a ramp on the porch. They took a ramp up, and they both sat next to each other in their scooters, and we did the typical political grip and grin line where everybody goes up, so you say hello, they take pictures, and it's like, how fast can we move people through? So we did all that, got a great picture with them, and then Chris and I are milling around, and then I noticed, the president and his wife are alone, and no one's talking to him on the porch, and I'm thinking, this is my chance to have like a real conversation with the former president of the United States. And I spent some time thinking about it. I thought, what would really get him talking? I thought, I'm going to talk to him about the property here because I know it's something he's passionate about, and he's built it up, and they live there. And that's more interesting for him to talk about probably than some political thing. So, I have it all figured out. I'm going to talk to him about the property, and I take a big step up on the porch and rip my pants right in front of him. And if you've ever done that before, you know that you can feel it, like you've done it, but you don't really know, like, how big is this, right? Am I completely flapping in the wind? Is it just a little, pop? And I'm, I've like really jumped right onto the porch in front of the president and his wife. So I'm in it now. I can't walk away. And I also don't want to look. Maybe they didn't notice. Now, And so I started the conversation with him. I asked him about the property, um, and then immediately not paid any attention to what he was saying. And I'm looking at Barbara, who's staring with some really intent eyes. I'm thinking she knows exactly what just happened. And I'm not at all listening to him. And then, sometimes you're not listening to somebody in a conversation and they stop talking and the tone of voice, they asked you a question and you're supposed to say something. And so not only did I just, burst my pants in front of the president, I didn't listen at all to what he said, which was my whole thing. And I remember saying something like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then jumping kind of backwards off the porch. So I did survive. I got onto the bus as quickly as possible. But that was my experience meeting the president of the United States.
I thought your first question was be like, well, how big is the hole? Can you take a look for me?
Yeah.
And that would have been that's a good conversation starter right there.
It would have been a good
he won't forget you.
Really good.
I don't know if that's what you want to remember, but I love that story. The 5 Ps. Talk about those.
Yeah. So the book is about this idea that there are a segment of Americans. In fact, let me bounce up a little bit. 82% of all Americans, no matter where they are politically or faith-wise, say that they really, really want the brands they do business with to match their values. And 75% of all Americans say they've switched a brand in the last 12 months over some kind of brand misalignment. And Kristen and I, because of our almost 25 years really of work in Republican politics, we have this thorough knowledge of the kinds of people who donate to political candidates and who are politically conservative and Christian, because they're the types of people who are giving money to Donald Trump and Ted Cruz and Brian Kemp and other clients. And we call these people liberty spenders. They share the same characteristics of so many Americans who want to do business with brands that match their values. They just happen to be Christian or conservative. And our book is about if you want to market to this audience of 76.5 million people who spend $5 trillion a year, then you need to master the 5 Ps. I think there's a whole section, I won't do it because I can go on for 45 minutes on this, about how I show how Trump mastered these 5 Ps. But you need to understand the people and your people within the Liberty Spenders. Most of us don't need 76.5 million customers to be doing quite well financially. But so who is that sliver of people within the Liberty Spenders you need to be doing business with? How do you position yourself with it? How do you develop a true passionate story that'll hook them and make them want to learn more and buy from you? How do you prove? This is a big thing. I've never seen anybody else's marketing system. How do you prove that your marketing that you're doing actually works? That's one lesson from politics that we learned, which is don't spend $100,000 on a TV ad that you've not tested ahead of time. It's worth the $10,000 to test to make sure you're $100,000. It's smart. And then how to roll a product out's the 5th P. What's the product rollout, and what's it look like?
Yeah, I suggest people check out the book, and you can see here on the page, the 5 Ps here: people, positioning, passion, proof, product. And it applies to anything, really. But I'd love for you to talk about Liberty Spenders and what you do there. I don't know if you want to talk about anticipating heaven.
Yeah. So we there with Liberty Spenders and our Liberty Business Alliance that we run, we work with Christian and conservative entrepreneurs who want to market to these Liberty Spenders we just talked about. And we do some coaching, but we also do some one-on-one work. One of our clients that we did some one-on-one engagement with is Pamela Pyle, who wrote this great book called Anticipating Heaven. And she is a hospice doctor who dealt with a lot of patients towards the end of life. And her book is about her experiences with these patients and how to die well. And there's most of us don't think about that. And we helped her market that book, which became a very rapid bestseller, and racked up tons of positive reviews, and picked up a lot of momentum from somebody who's never written a book before. And the content's amazing, by the way. I would highly recommend it, even if you're not at that stage of your life where you're thinking about it. Most of us have a family member who's going through that stage in life, and doing that right's important. One of the things that Pamela says in her book, and she says when you talk to her, most American families, many American families, are spending $80,000 in the last week of their relative's life, and on things that may not be necessary. So there's a whole host of really practical things in that book too. But we helped her market it, helped her achieve bestseller status, helped book some media for her, and she just fits our kind of Christian profile really well because her book is written from a faith-based perspective.
When you say marketing, talk about just, I mean, maybe big picture, like type of campaigns. Are you doing email campaigns, doing Facebook? Are you doing TV? Like what kind of marketing are you looking into for something like this?
For her, we concentrated a lot on email and on text messaging. We also worked with some influencers who she and her husband had good connections with, and tapped into some networks of folks that we knew would enjoy her book. I'm a big believer. We're a marketing firm that we believe so much can be accomplished that our first reflex doesn't need to be or should not be spending a bunch of money on paid media. And so we finding these kind of influencers, others who can be make a big difference for you, can be great for people like you and people like Pamela.
It looks like you had a big influence from Tony Robbins. I'd like to hear.
Tony's.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I had such a I went to my very first Tony Robbins event, which was Unleash the Power Within in LA in 2019. And I had never once heard anyone talk about the importance of managing your state like Tony Robbins talks about it. And it was absolutely transformational in my life. And at that Unleash the Power Within, my wife and I committed to going to 2 other of his events that year. And then COVID hit. And so we couldn't get to all the events, and they all went virtual. And we went to our next one. So we did 2 events in 19. We had another one coming, and finally went to that event virtually. And in that virtual event, we joined his platinum community, and then went to a ton of his stuff for 3 years. And to be honest, if I could live my life at a Tony Robbins event, I probably would. It's such a positive and transformational experience. And we were going to probably 8 of his things a year. That picture, I think, that you were showing on your screen was actually taken at Tony's house, which was a real privilege to be able to go to. And a lot of things that I have learned about mindset, state, strategy, story come from Tony, who I owe a lot to.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins stuff as well. Definitely have listened to Awaken the Power Within and Personal Power 1, 2, and all those. So, I know you mentioned David Meerman Scott in the book also, who John, my business partner, and I know, and he's been on John's podcast, and great individual.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
He has this great book about raving fans, and he speaks at Tony Robbins' Business Mastery. And he's got such a great perspective on this.
I'd like to, Kurt, this can go on and on. I have one last question before I ask it. I want to point people to check out libertyspenders.com to learn more, get the book. I thought it was great. prospergroupcorp.com. Just last question is just businesses that you love because of the 5 Ps. And when I think of this stuff and in the genre I think of Aaron and Alan Baylor of Four Patriots. I think of their stuff, and it makes me think of Lee Bellinger and Independent Living News and some other businesses. What are some of yours when you consider your five Ps?
Yeah.
I know you talk about some of this in the book as well, but I just like to hear your personals.
Yeah, I like talking about companies whose products I think are awesome. 7 Weeks Coffee is a great company that makes excellent coffee that my wife and I drink regularly, as well as red coffee, which I have to bounce back and forth. Red coffee, which also sells under Patriot Red, actually is made in Greenwood, just about 5 minutes from my house. I didn't know that.
Wow.
And then, lo and behold, I can actually drive over and pick it up fresh from the roastery. And an amazing business. I'm also a giant fan of Every Life diapers, which my wife and I, who have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, have used until recently. Now that our
You're in the
3-year-old
thick of it. Holy cow.
Yes. He's been potty trained, so no need for Every Life diapers anymore, but absolutely great company. And then I think a lot of folks should be checking out Public Square, Patriot Mobile. Those are 2 great companies doing some really interesting things and what some people call the Patriot economy or parallel economy, and are great businesses.
Kurt, I want to be the first one to thank you. Everyone, check out the book. Check out libertyspenders.com and prospergroupcorp.com. And we'll see everyone next time. Kurt, thanks so much.
Yes.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.